Hello and welcome to this first ever episode of Things That Die. Yeah, this podcast has been floating around in my ether, wanting me to, bring it forward to you guys for the last year. And I'm excited to see where it goes and to open up the conversations around breaking the taboo around the death and endings we face in our lives, because death is something that we naturally shy around talking about. We actually live in a really death phobic culture, where there is so much focus on extending life, living longer. People are nervous around having conversations around death. And it's something that we're all going to experience. We are all going to die. We are all going to experience that. And for many of us, we associate death with leaving the physical body, and we all have different ideas and beliefs around what happens about when we die and what that looks like, but it is something that we are all going to experience, and death isn't just the physical body either. It is about the death that we face on a day-to-day basis, death of identities, changes in death and endings in our relationships, the relationship to ourselves, health and bodies as we get older and our bodies die. You know, our bodies are dying every single day, but we are living in a really death phobic culture, especially in the West. I know that there are different cultures that really do honor death in a really different way. And so I wanted to have this podcast. I wanted to open up these conversations for us to have, so we can explore what death means and look at our own relationship to death. Like, why look at our relationship to death? Partly because we are going to be facing more death on this planet. I should caveat, like, who am I to be having this as a conversation? I'm Natalie Miles. I am a psychic medium, and so and a writer. I've written a book on how to connect to your intuition and why it's important for the times that we live in currently. I've also been sharing energy forecasts since 2017, about what the energy that we face on our planet monthly and going forward each year. I predicted the pandemic, and that 2020 was going to be a real big year of change and upheaval. I'm also, so many different hats. I used to have a podcast called So You Think You're Intuitive, which was one of the top spiritual podcasts on iTunes, with like 1.3 million downloads. But I ended that and faced the death of that podcast, because it felt right to evolve and adapt and start talking about something different. And now I'm really excited to bring this podcast to life. And my relationship to death, again, being a psychic medium and having these conversations, for me, I do talk to loved ones that have passed over, and they share information, they share experiences, things that the person that I'm reading for needs to hear, things that the loved one who's crossed over wants to share about what's happening in that person's life. They sometimes share how they passed over, especially when there are, we don't have all the answers, or there's uncertainty around how that person died. They come through and share that as well. So for me, I have a relationship to death through talking to the other side. predominantly. And I guess that is an interesting, for some people that don't necessarily believe that psychic mediums are real. For me, it's like the information, the detailed information that the other side bring through just blows my mind, and continually blows my mind too. So this was also part of me wanting to dive deeper into that relationship of death, to get other people's viewpoints, and also because I've been receiving the information for a while. And if you've been following my work for a while, you'll know I've spoken about this previously, that it feels like over the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to be experiencing more death on this planet moving forward. So this podcast is here for us to kind of, I want to say, like, prep ourselves to really look at our relationship to death. So when there is more death around us, we can maybe navigate it with a bit more ease and a bit more grace and a bit more understanding as, what is our role in a constantly dying and renewing world? And as our planet shifts and change, what does that mean for us? Instead of separating ourselves from this process and what's happening on our planet, how can we get a deeper understanding and relationship to death? The idea of this podcast has been around for about a year. In fact, the idea of the podcast came to me while I was sleeping. I was in a dream, and my guides pulled me out of the dream and gave me the title, Things That Die. And they kept repeating it to me. And I love it when they do that. And they were like, you need to write this down. Wake up, Natalie, wake up. Things That Die, Things That Die. This is the title. And so it's been about a year in the making to hit record, but it feels like now is the perfect timing. One of the main kind of, I want to say, trigger points to having this conversation is that I was doing a lot of traveling last year. I basically traveled from the west coast of Canada to the east coast. I am technically a Canadian citizen. I was living in Canada for 9 years and have recently moved back to the UK. But on my travels in Canada, I was traveling from Vancouver Island back to Vancouver. And I went to the toilet. And when I was in the toilet, there was a mum and her daughter. And the daughter was probably about 8 years old. And I was in the toilet doing my thing, and I overheard this conversation. And it was a little girl, and she was asking her mum, and they were obviously going on a family trip, and she was asking who was going to be at grandma's house. And the mum started to list off all the people that was going to be at grandma's house, all the family that they were going to go and visit. And then there was this awkward silence pause. And the mum then paused and she said, but you need to remember that grandpa's not going to be there. He's not going to be there at this trip. And the little girl went, she was like, oh, okay. And she said, remember. And then the mum went, remember, because grandpa's gone on a really long hike. He's gone for a really, really long hike, and he's not going to be back for a while. So just you be okay with that, okay? Because grandpa's gone for a really long hike. And I suddenly realized what this woman was kind of implying to her daughter, that her grandfather was dead and had passed over and wasn't going to be there, but didn't have the confidence to share that with her daughter. And you could see, by that time I left the cubicle and was washing my hands, and you could see there's confusion on this little girl's face, and And having lived in Canada, if you go hiking in Canada also involves bears, cougars, coyotes, and other big predatory wildlife. So talk about, like, you're protecting your daughter from not using the dead word, or not knowing how to share that that her grandfather's died. But that also breeds in like massive fear as well, because if I was this 8-year-old, I think I would be saying like, well, hang on a second, granddad's gone on this really big hike, but what about all the bears and the wildlife? I kind of, when I was in the bathroom, I kind of wanted to say to the little girl, don't worry, it's okay. And explain it to her. And obviously it wasn't my place to say anything, but I left the bathroom and went back to my car on the ferry, and I was really shocked, saddened, and it made me think, about the little girl and how she experienced this conversation around death. And then it made me think about the mum, and it made me think about how she must have been feeling around how it's an awkward topic for her. And it was a real wake-up call around, well, if this is just one conversation, if this is just one snapshot of a conversation around death, how do we, in this death phobic culture that we're living in, and this fear of talking around death, and the emotions around that, and the fears that come up around that. And I'm going to do lots more episodes around our relationship to death, because a lot's been coming through in client sessions and downloads and stuff that want to be shared, as well as I'm going to be doing lots of amazing guest episodes too, talking about their relationship to death. But yeah, it just felt like this was a really important conversation to have. And this moment on the ferry then, as I was driving, I drove thousands of kilometers across Canada, I was reflecting on my own relationship to death and what my first memories of death were and are. My parents are still alive, so I haven't experienced the loss of a parent. But my first relationship to death was the death of my cat Cleo when I was young. I remember that really specifically. And I really wanted to hold a funeral, and I remember writing a poem, and I wanted to make it this big ritual for Cleo. And then when we moved house, I'll always remember being like, thinking, well, does this mean that we're leaving Cleo behind in the garden? But that was definitely my first relationship to death, around this sense of honouring the life and the soul of Cleo. And I remember the poem I wrote about her was all about the things she loved and what she did, and my relationship to her. My next bigger relationship to death was the death of my grandfather, which was very sudden and very unexpected. He was 59 years old, and he had had a heart attack, and we'd been with him the weekend before. And it's an image and a memory that has really stayed with me and shaped me today. Because I'll always remember we were at the park, and we went to the park and we were flying a kite. We went to fly kites, and the kite was red. And I remember being in this park and being really happy and flying the kite. And my granddad was always really playful and fun. And he always, I want to say, like, put a brave face on things. Like, he smiled and we had fun. He was just fun and made you laugh. But I remember looking back that day, and he'd taken himself off on his own, and he was sat on a bench and he was contemplating life. And you could see he was just lost in his thoughts, lost in where he'd gone to, but he looked like he was contemplating life. And then with his passing and his unexpected death the following weekend, it suddenly was clear there was this kind of moment where it just looked like he was reflecting on his life of where he was right then in that moment. And it's an image that has always stuck with me, and a question, I guess, that's always stuck with me as well, is that, and you hear that where people say things to people that they wouldn't say, they express their love, or they go and see people and are with people before they die. Without them, they kind of don't know physically or even mentally, but there's something in the subconscious that knows that something's coming to an end. And you pick up the phone and have the conversations, or you share your love to someone. But that moment with my granddad, just watching him, it was one of those really powerful moments. But what was fascinating was, I think, the biggest part of that relationship to death was the fact, and was sparked by the little girl in the bathroom, and I guess my intrigue of having more of these conversations, is that I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral of my grandfather. I was 11 years old, and my nan didn't want the grandchildren to go. And again, on reflection and having conversations with my mum, I think it was partly to protect her in some way, I think she didn't want to grieve around us. I think she was quite a private person in a lot of ways with her feelings and her emotions, and I don't think she wanted to grieve around us. And but at the time, I didn't understand that. I felt like I'd done something wrong, or that I couldn't be part of something. And I'll remember the black cars arriving outside of the front of the house from the morgue, and I watched everyone get in the cars, and I remember sitting down by the front door, and I can still feel the carpet beneath me as I talk about it, and was like, wow, they've all gone and I'm here. My sister was there, and obviously someone looking after us. But I remember being like, but I want to be there. I want to go and say goodbye to Granddad. Like, I want to be part of the ritual. I want to be part of the process. I want to be part of the conversation. And obviously then I didn't know I was going to end up being a psychic medium and talking to dead people, and moving spirits across that is kind of stuck in, in that limbo as well. So, but it really formulated that. And also seeing my dad cry. I'll remember him being in the dining room and, watching him cry. And I think there's something around like watching a parent be really emotionally vulnerable, or you see them cry like that for the first time. It also shapes you. It also shapes your relationship to endings, to emotions, to death, and what that looks like. So, and as I'm talking about this, you might also be thinking about your first really moment of death, whether it's a death of a parent, or death of an animal, or death of a grandparent, or I think reflecting on those moments, reflecting on those feelings, reflecting on those missed moments as well, really makes us look at our relationship, to death, and what that means, and what that means for us. At university in my 20s, I guess it was 19, 20, one of my housemates passed over. He died in a car crash. He fell asleep at the wheel, and that was the first time that I'd experienced someone my own age die, and that had a really big impact too. Again, that like we could be here one moment and gone the next, and it made me again feel like, wow, we've got to live life. We've got to do this. This just feels really, really big to be here, and to follow our dreams and follow our passions and do what feels really, really important, even through the big, tricky stuff. And I was there also the day that my nan passed over too. We were there, and I could do a whole episode on that, but she had a stroke And and then my mum, my aunt and me we all happened to be together. So we took her to hospital, and I remember one of the images that stays with me with my nan is she needed to go in and have an x-ray, and she couldn't get her bra off, and my mum and my aunt were making some phone calls, and so I went in with my nan, and she just looked like a little girl, asking for help from me. And there was something again around that generational, the matriarch, she was the matriarch of the family. And there I was kind of helping her, and it made you realize that again with the dying body and the vulnerability of it and the look of helplessness on her face. It was a powerful moment that sticks and stays. I'm sharing some of my moments around death, so that you can reflect on yours and what that looks like for you personally. One of my favorite phrases comes from my mum, and it's a family phrase, and it's called "Give it death." And if I was going on stage or rowing or anything, exams, anything like that, mum used to always say, "Give it death, give it death." And it always used to make me smile. Instead of "give it life," it was all about like, "Give it death." And I asked her the other day where it comes from, and apparently it came from like a skiing trip, where some of them were like going down a run at the top, and it was like, right, let's give it death. And that has also stuck with me as a phrase around, isn't it interesting? Instead of giving it life, it's about going all in to the ultimate moment of giving death. It's definitely been also a phrase that I've definitely lived my life by as well. Give it death, go all in, make it happen. And follow your dreams, follow your passions, and make it happen. The conversations on the show that are going to be coming up, I'm really excited to share with you. I've obviously recorded some already, and they bring up a lot, and we're going to be exploring what death in relationships look like, death. I want to be talking also about AI and future technology, human composting. Going to be talking to different people with different spiritual beliefs on their relationship to death and endings. We're going to be talking to scientists, environmentalists. We're going to be talking about Mother Nature and our relationship to nature and death and endings. Oh man, I'm so excited to see where this all ends up. We're going to be talking about sex and death. I'm excited to share that episode with you. It is. I'm excited to see where it all goes. This is going to be a real adventure for me as well, because in the end, I've realized that the things I'm talking about bringing to you is because I need to hear the information too. I need to learn more and look at my own relationship to death. If you're into gene keys, I have, 3 of my keys are the gene key 28, which is all about immortality and death. So I find it really fascinating that I'm being called to, bring this podcast to you to look at our relationship to death. Before you jump into some of the other conversations and some of the other episodes, just keep asking yourself and bringing it back to like, where do you feel this death phobic energy comes up for you personally? What is your current relationship to death and endings? What endings are you currently facing in your own life? And and listen to the body. Like, some of these episodes might make you feel really uncomfortable in the body, and where does that come up for you? Because the body is trying to communicate with you around those feelings of death and endings, the feeling of grief. There's a lot of grief in the collective. I know a lot of people are moving through some really difficult things, not just the death of loved ones, but endings of relationships, beginnings and new beginnings as well coming up. So yeah, but this is a time to look at that relationship and begin to have those conversations. It's been a pleasure with you it's been a pleasure to share this first episode with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate. Please review on iTunes. It just means that more people get to see and find out about this podcast. So yeah, if you've enjoyed it as well, please share with a friend, a family member, someone else that needs to look at their relationship and the things that die in our lives. It's going to be a weekly podcast too. So if you're listening to this in the first week, there is a guest episode with Ruby Warrington. Go and have a listen. And then, episodes will be coming out every Wednesday. So make sure you subscribe so they come automatically to, where you listen to your shows. Thanks again and see you next week.